Okay, so I am back to work on graphing of quadratics. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the number 13, which is in standard form. Okay, and again, there are multiple ways that you can go about graphing. One is always to do a t-table. That does take time, but I will show you what you need to do. So generally I put in -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Now, according to where the graph's moved, I may need to go put in another point. So the other thing that I always do is if I'm substituting in a -2, I always put parentheses around the negative. Okay, so the -2. And one of the reasons is because if you're trying to run this in your calculator or by hand, either one, but primarily most of you are trying to run it in your calculator, if you don't put the -2 in parentheses, it will not do it correctly. So you do need the -2 in parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead real quick, and I'm just going to run this in my calculator. And I would suggest that you do the same thing, and let's see if we get the same answer. So if you want to, pause it and run it in your calculator, and then let's see if we agree. So what I get is a -11. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat that same process with the -2. So again, if you want to pause, oh, sorry, I was repeating it with the -1. I did repeat it with the -2. Wasn't thinking. Okay, and I get a -4 here. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat it with 0. Now the thing that's nice about 0 here is when I put in 0, this is going to be 0 and 0, so I'm going to get the -3, and that's always true when you're in standard form. You're going to get 0 whatever that n number is. That's called our C value. Okay, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to put +1 in. Now in this case, do not put negative, or do not put parentheses, because this should give you a -1 here. 2 times 1 minus 3. So only put parentheses around it if it is a negative. So we're going to put in a -1 squared, and we're not putting a parentheses around it. We're just doing the opposite of 1 squared. Think of it that way. Plus 2 times 1 minus 3. And I get a -2. Okay, and then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to put 2 in. And I get a -3. Okay, now how do I know when to stop? Well, I know when to stop when I get the y value repeated. And so that's telling me that my parabola, which these are always parabolas, okay, quadratics are always parabola, P-A-R-A-B-O-L-A. In other words, they're going to look either up or down. Okay, how do I know if they're up or down? Well, I look at the a value, the front number, and if the a is less than 0, in other words, if a is negative, it's going to go down, and if a is greater than 0, it's positive, and it's going to go up. Okay, so that's what I'm looking at. So what I would do now is just go graph, and we'll get me some graph paper here. And so I'm just going to quickly graph this. Okay. And so I have 2 and -11. Well, that's way down there. I'm not going to bother with it. I have a -1, -4, -1, -2, -3, -4. I have 0, -3. I have 1, -2. And I have, did I count that right? -1, -4, 0, -3, 1, -2, and then 2, -3. Okay, now what you got to remember, this almost looks like a straight line, but it is a parabola, so it's got to curve. Okay, because remember, down here on this one, we've got to hit all the way to a -11. Okay, whoops, that is bad. So we need to come down to all the way to a -11. And so that's what it's going to look like when I'm done graphing. Okay, you could also look at symmetry, and I didn't do a very good job here on that, but this would be my axis of symmetry, and maybe I should just do that. We'll put that in. I also know this is over here at 4. So we'll get that coming in a little bit better. Okay. Anyway, you just need a sketch of it, and that's kind of what it should look like. Okay. So that is one way. The other way that you could do it, I'll put this in a different color, but the other way that you could do it is you could find your x-intercepts and your y-intercepts. Now in this case, when I went to find my x-intercept, I would let, if I'm doing my x-intercept, I'm going to let y equals 0, okay, on that. And if I let y be 0, I want you to look at this and think about what we were just doing on the other videos. This is either a factoring or a quadratic formula problem, okay? Now, what's going to happen on this one, because I'm looking at my graph, is the fact that it is not going to cross the x-axis. So if you run the quadratic, what you're going to do is you're going to get imaginary numbers, okay? Imaginary numbers. And when you get imaginary numbers, it simply is just telling you that it's not crossing the x-axis, okay? And if it doesn't cross the x-axis, then basically you're going to have to do a t-table anyway. So in this problem, the t-table was the better method to do. Okay, now remember this, t-tables work all the time. As long as you put the numbers in and you simplify them correctly, t-tables always work. So if you're ever graphing anything and you are unsure, a shorter method, whatever, run a t-table. Okay, so I'm going to do one more. So we'll do number 14. Now 14 is in a different form. Now this is called vertex form. And the reason it's called vertex form is because I could just look at it and state the vertex. Okay? And your vertex here is what we call our HK value. And in that case, your H is this value, not the negative in front of it, it's just that value. Okay, so in this case, it would be 3 and 1. So my vertex is 3, 1. So when I go to graph, okay, I should have moved that down a little bit. Let me slide that down. When I go to graph, a couple of things. Well, never mind. Don't know what I want to do. I'm going to put 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1. I guess that's high enough. And then I have a -2 as my slope, which means it's going to open down. So what I need to do is simply just put a number in, and I can go on either side here. So I'm going to go with the number 2. Okay. Okay. And so that would be a -1 squared plus 1, which is a -2 times 1 plus 1, which would be a -2 plus 1, which is a -1. So at 2, right, whoops, sorry, at 2, well, crap, don't know what's happening here. At 2, I'm at a -1, okay? So at 2, I'm at a -1, which also means symmetry-wise, I'm also over here. And then I can just sketch my graph in, okay? It's not a very pretty graph, but you can hear hopefully might hear my alarm going off in the back. I need to go take something out of the oven. So that's graphing in a nutshell. Again, even with this one, a t-table would work. So you could definitely go back in and graph a t-table if that would be easier for you.